Most people would say that having an American mom and British dad would not make me bilingual, since they both speak English. Yet, having grown up with parents of two different nationalities, I discovered ingrained subtleties within each English-speaking culture. Of course, there are differences such as loo instead of bathroom, Tuesday instead of Tuesday, herb instead of herb. However, these nuances extend beyond vocabulary and pronunciation to the unique ways the two cultures act on a daily basis. Americans are much more straightforward with their anger, whereas the British are more passive-aggressive. For example, my dad will simmer with his anger, while my mom will make it known she is mad. These differences even extend to humor. English humor is witty, wry, salty, sarcastic, juvenile, and even cruel or self-deprecating, whereas American humor is silly, or could even be described as slapstick. Although both my parents speak the same language, their identities and the ways in which they communicate are influenced by where they come from. I believe there is a beauty in the unexpected differences we find between how each person, language, and culture communicates. I see the creation of these differences as a cycle, one feeding off of the other. The ways in which we communicate are influenced by where we come from, and in turn, our culture reflects how and what values we communicate. While visiting another country, it is easy to get caught up in all the impressive museums, monuments, attractions, and most importantly, whether or not we are speaking a foreign language correctly. However, there is more to a culture than just learning the language. What often happens is that we get swept up in visiting tourist attractions and understanding another language that we don't take the time to notice and reflect on the small but important cultural differences about each country. The summer after my sophomore year of high school, I went on a month-long French immersion trip. While staying with my French host family, I discovered that there is more to learning how a culture communicates than just the language. The French don't rush down streets, eating half-devoured sandwiches and gulping down a cup of to-go coffee. Instead, they gather to eat lunch together as a family, demonstrating their cultural priorities. In comparison to how Americans like to squeeze as many different types of products into one store, the French have many different stores for all the different types of products. Yes, you have your supermarkets, but you also have your cheese stores, meat stores, bakeries, and pastry shops. I also noticed that I almost never saw French women and girls wearing leggings outside of the house. Even in 90-degree weather, they were wearing jeans. One night, as my French host sister and I biked home at 11:30 p.m., her parents already asleep when we arrived, I remember thinking as I quietly got into bed that night that French parents have so much trust in their kids. It is not just the simple day-to-day interactions, commonplace occurrences, or how another country is organized that reflects cultural differences. Subconscious visual cues also communicate the values of another culture. At another point during the trip, while staying in Normandy, my roommate and I realized we needed shampoo and conditioner, so we made our way to the pharmacy to make our purchase. The bell above the door chimed as I confidently entered. Not the young girl who, to her parents' astonishment, was unable to learn French despite visiting her grandparents in France most summers, but one who could, after taking French for 3 years, confidently make purchases in any store. I spotted a bottle of shampoo with lavender twigs decorated across it, and the word shampooing. Perfect, I thought. What could be better than lavender-scented shampoo? After purchasing the bottle, I showed it to Madame. She laughed and said, "Oh, Maddie, this is shampoo for getting rid of lice." Little did I know the words for lice and lice eggs were also written across the bottle in calm, nothing to worry about colors. The lavender had deceived me. My face flushed red, and I felt incredibly stupid and embarrassed until I thought about it more. See, in the US, the lice shampoo packaging is not pretty. In fact, it is advertised quite differently. The Rid shampoo logo is red and shaped like a stop sign, easily recognizable in an aisle, especially when accompanied with images of lice. Knowing that this was lice shampoo relied on me knowing 2 key words and looking especially carefully, since the bottle looked like any other shampoo. The visuals on the US lice shampoo packaging communicated that having lice was something to be feared, perhaps even taboo. But in France, the visuals on the packaging communicated that having lice is just no big deal. It happens. It is because of this experience that I became aware of the subconscious visual cues we so heavily rely on. They play an integral part of our day-to-day lives, something I had never really paid much attention to, much less how they differ from culture to culture. Language is often seen as a barrier, but if people learn to look past what language they speak, they would find that communication is still possible. In November of my 9th grade year, my classmates and I went on a school trip to Tucson, Arizona. One morning, we joined an ICE protest at the Nogales border wall. A group member handed me a poster, which I tucked under my arm as I took photographs. On the Mexican side of the wall, a man about my height caught my eye. He wore a cowboy hat and seemed to be searching for somebody. I waved to him as a hello, pointed to my camera, and then gestured to him. He nodded his head and stood still. I framed his face between 2 panels of the wall, hoping the image would be as powerful as the moment felt to me. I was about to mouth thank you and then look for my class when the man waved his arms to keep me from leaving. He motioned for me to hold up the sign. The sign read, "Sanctuary everywhere. We will protect each other." I stared at the camera with a look of defiance, hoping to show I was more interested in building bridges than walls. He took a quick picture, smiled, gave a nod of thanks, and then walked away. As I rushed to catch up with my classmates, not wanting to get left behind, my mind lingered on our wordless exchange, still processing the interaction. What I learned from this interaction, and then applied to the broader sense of the world, is that you don't always need to know the other person's language in order to understand them. In a world where there's much misunderstanding, these nuances for how cultures communicate past language is what makes learning about a new culture so important. In fact, I believe we can understand more about those around us and comprehend more about those from different cultures if instead of just learning the language, we examine the culture as a whole. By examining the differences ingrained and almost subtle between my own parents, I discovered that there are aspects of who they are and their identities that are shaped by where they come from. This examination of my own life, along with the satisfaction that comes with finding these cultural insights, ignited my want to continue to explore this idea and encourage others to do so as well. I want to ask you to take a moment now and reflect on those who surround you every day. Reflect on the differences between the ways in which you communicate, your everyday routines, the values you prize most, the ways in which you move through the world. Reflect on the differences that occur even between those who are from the same country as you. It is in noticing these differences and learning about how different cultures communicate that we can better understand those around us. We need to be demonstrating the value of varying perspectives. Instead of seeing difference as division, we need to start learning to see connections. Thank you.